Alright, so here we have a little different approach to what many would consider blue-black Tezzeret Trading Post. The conception of this deck actually revolves around something a little different. I came to this plan with the consideration that Curse of Death's Hold would shut down a lot of decks. Originally I had conceived this deck being more like a wolf run green-black red with Curse of Death's Hold, with obviously the intention of getting to Curse of Death's Hold by turns 3 or 4 and shutting most decks out of the match, not really giving them much of a fair shot. The deck has obviously transmogrified since that point. We're looking at I incorporated the black-white control engine with the Phyrexia's core artifact draw, which then led me to realizing the great synergies that Trading Post brought to that package, and then therefore also a simple splash of blue to add Tezzeret, Agent of Bolas, which also gives us quite a bit of access to good cards in the sideboard, as you'll see. So first part, basic breakdown, mana base. I utilized, where are we at here? 3 Mycosynth Wellspring rather than the typical package, which many lists I've been seeing are running 3 Ichor Wellspring and 2 Mycosynth. I don't contend that Ichor Wellspring is not truly amazing. I just found that in this build, Mycosynth Wellspring allows me, one, to run 23 lands because the rest of my cards are a little bit greedy. Meanwhile, running ramp, with this style of a build, I'm pretty much assured that I don't have to mulligan a 2-land hand or a 5-land hand. Because of the staying powers of things like Black Sun Zenith, Solemn, Tezzeret. They allow you to find business if you don't have a lot going on, and then if you do have a lot of cards in your hand, the Mycosynth Wellspring pretty much helps you in conjunction with the rest of the ramp spells to make sure that your mana base is going to get you to the point where you need to be. So very consistent from that standpoint, the mana base is 4 Phyrexia's core. I started off with 3. You absolutely have to run 4 in this build. The colored mana is nominally important, and it's very well fixed between the Solemns and the Spheres and the Mycosynths. So you have to see Phyrexia's cores to really make this deck good in a lot of matchups. Obviously, not to say that it's not good if you don't have it, but the lines of play that it creates for you are inordinate. So definitely 4 Phyrexia's core. The blue-black dual lands are pretty much a given. You only need 1 island because, again, pretty much at least main board, all you're looking at is, the need to run 1 blue for Tezzeret, the chance that you'll use it on a Phyrexian Metamorph later game to save some life. But you also have the Solemn to pull out the island. You have the Mycosynths, and you have Sphere of the Suns, all capable of getting you the single blue that you need in your main. And then, of course, the rest is swamps. The only difference here is I'm opting to go Cavern of Souls over Inkmoth Nexus. This is something that I've pondered about to great lengths. I think Inkmoth Nexus could be a little bit more powerful, whereas Cavern of Souls, I believe, is going to help me resolve Wurmcoil Engines that, once resolved, Delver is not going to be able to deal with. Typically, they would be able to deal with Wurmcoil Engine. There's a little secret about this deck that makes Vapor Snag absolutely terrible for Delver, and that is the Phyrexia's core and the Trading Post. You would view Wurmcoil Engine bad as this matchup because you would get Time Walk to Vapor Snag. Phyrexia's core and Trading Post actually make Vapor Snag a liability for Delver in this matchup because no longer can they Time Walk me for 1 mana and have me lose a life. Now I just play my Wurmcoil intelligently to where if they have a Vapor Snag, I have open mana to sacrifice it, effectively costing them their card, their Vapor Snag. I no longer lose the point of life, and now there are 2 3/3 Wurmcoil tokens that are pretty challenging for Delver to deal with, especially in the situation where you get the Trading Post Wurmcoil engine online, where you can completely start abusing Wurmcoil Engine's tokens to bring Wurmcoil back, as well as drawing some cards. So that's the mana base. Again, Cavern of Souls is just because I feel like I'll see Delver probably 2/3 of the time that I'm at this tournament. The reason that I played this deck is because I believe that it has a strong matchup against Delver, zombies, and match up very well in a lot of areas. Any of them that are running main deck Mental Missteps totally whiff, Gut Shots totally whiff, Mutagenic Growths totally whiff. Again, this deck makes Vapor Snag pretty bad, and I have all the different ways in the world to deal with their threats. I think the most popular build's going to be the new Charles Gindy build that took second at the Star City in Washington, D.C. That build utilized Hero Bladehold, which I think is a great meta call right now. But I do have the feeling that Curse of Death's Hold is going to be much better against that build than it would be against the Restoration Angel build. With Curse of Death's Hold in play, likely keeping them off most, if not all, of their other creatures, Hero Bladehold is going to be a 2/3 creature that does not pump himself and makes no creatures to pump. So Curse of Death's Hold seems like it's going to shine really, really well in that matchup. And as I think I had mentioned, the Sphere of the Suns, the Pristine Talismans, they are to resolve a turn 4 Curse of Death's Hold. Meanwhile, kind of giving me a little bit of time against the quick aggro matchups. This deck will lose in situations where an incredibly fast deck has a fast draw, and I do not see one of those items, or if I'm on the draw. On the play, this is a very strong strategy. You can resolve, essentially this entire row right here is meant to shut the opponent down and buy me time. So the Sphere of the Suns, the Pristine Talismans, the Tumble Magnet, they are all getting in the way of my opponent beating me before I can resolve a Curse of Death's Hold. Black Sun Zenith, sometimes I will use them very early just to reset the board to slow down the first couple of turns. The first few turns of a game are where this deck has a little bit of trouble. This deck has a very powerful late game. Phyrexian Metamorph in certain matchups is also a deterrent on those. Naya Aggro, red-green aggro, Naya Pod, they all have very efficient ground creatures that Phyrexian Metamorph can copy to alleviate some of that early aggression. For instance, a very strong line of play is copying an opponent's Strangleroot Geist with a Phyrexian Metamorph, even at the cost of 2 life, because I can block, have it come back with the Undying, and become something that can block even more, potentially a Huntmaster, or even something that possibly I control on the field, like a Pristine Talisman or a Tumble Magnet, which will then slow them down even further. This third row is kind of the business row. With the exception of Solemn Simulacrum, he is not entirely business, but he does have a lot of synergy with the Trading Post. Batterskull, he just clearly, with a deck that has a lot of mana, is much more powerful than advertised, because the fact that he's a 4/4 Vigilance lifelink, for one, is very powerful in of itself. But the idea that it's something that won't go away because I can continuously bounce it to my hand and replay it because I have a wealth of mana available to me becomes pretty absurd. Spine of Ish Sah, this is a card I've considered to relegating to the sideboard. However, I've kept it in the main deck because of a couple factors. One, if this deck gets its footing, you know, you're talking about turn 5 or turn 6, and you're not dead and you have a little bit of a presence